Here with the Entrepreneurial University. Okay, if we go to the first slide, this is quite a young academic subject. It started in the 70s and it came from the United States, but quite slowly came to Europe also. But it started with looking at firms coming out from the academy as a spin-off companies. That is the oldest studies we can find from the 70s. Then it became more of IPR studies during the 70s and 80s. And then we can see a broadening of the concept, especially in the end of the 90s and in 2000. I was involved myself in international project about academic entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial universities in the European Commission in the mid-90s. And when we published a couple of papers there around 97, 2000 and so on. And I said to my colleague at that time, maybe this is overstudied. Maybe it will be not a big thing, but I was completely wrong. As you can see on the last bullet here, the past 15 years I can see at least 15 to 20 special issues about academic entrepreneurship in Entrepreneurial University, including, as Professor Lian said here, in small business economics. I can tell you there are more to come. Okay, short history. These are 4 emerging models, and they are maybe not so very new, but they are very active going on for the moment. And one is dealing with the leadership of the university. And that is the, what we call HI Innovate, that Safran's just mentioned. That is, makes sense for people inside the academy who want to assess the environment for academic entrepreneurship, but also how to lead and where to put down the efforts. Then we have a model called cluster initiatives that takes advantage of the clustering effect we have around the university, and where the university can take a leading role in developing the region and the external world around. Then we have a model called the interactive research, that is how the academy can work close with the practical world, the world outside the university, in a very interesting combination of synergies. And then finally we have the model that I call pentahelix. You heard about the triple helix before here, and before the triple helix it was some kind of dual helix relationship. But what I try to say there is that we're widening the stakeholder environment here, not just including the academy, firms and public sector. There are also other type of organizations around the university that can make sense for the university. Okay, say something about this model, and this is something I personally was involved in a lot for a couple of years ago with the European Commission. We were a couple of 5-6 people. We had a couple of meetings and tried to understand what are the major factors you have to deal with when you're leading an entrepreneurial university. And it came out some kind of a tool, an assessment tool for leaders that you can follow, like a business plan structure as you have in a business. That works very well actually, and it's become very, very popular in the European context. And we defined 7 dimensions of this entrepreneurial university. One is about strategy. And very simple, does the university have a strategy for being entrepreneurial? Is the leadership university committed to do that? And I have been working with many vice chancellors over the years, and I can tell you, at least in Europe, and I see it here also, that everyone is very positive to this. But it's very different to be positive, to be enthusiastic. And I heard from your leadership here that you definitely have a very enthusiastic leadership about this. So it's no doubt about that you have a good foundation about that. then we have, of course, many other things. We have, for instance, this capacity, the incentive structure. Does the university really have an incentive structure to be more broad than just doing research? That is something we have probably, at least in Sweden, that we not reward people with entrepreneurial mindsets and entrepreneurial actions. No. We reward people publishing papers in journals. We're not rewarding people for making up a patent or starting a company or starting something inside the university so much. And maybe that's something we have to look at. Many other things here. I don't have time to go through all of them, but one thing is also that we have pathways for entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not just starting a startup. It's much more than that. It's being an entrepreneurial professor, being an entrepreneurial teacher. You can start your own center of excellence inside university. That's very entrepreneurial. Or you can setting up new university curricula. That's also entrepreneurship, of course. So entrepreneurship is something that is embedded in the whole structure of the university. And of course, maybe the most boring part maybe is that you have to follow up all these things. You have to measure the success, which is not so easy because it's very long-term lasting effects of being an entrepreneurial university. We are a university in Linköping, where I come from, is 40 years old, and we can see the results of 10, 15 years of work now. And also when it comes to startups, it takes 10, 15 years before you see them growing. So you have to be very careful how you measure effects about this entrepreneurial university. But you need to do it in some way. This is a picture, of course, you all recognize. That is Silicon Valley, and there are many others also similar places in Europe and around the world, clusters. And the thing is that inside these clusters, you have a lot of different organizations. Clusters are not managed. They are growing in some way, for some reasons. But there are also organizations in these clusters that are doing wonderful work, taking advantage of the idea of the cluster. And that is the cluster initiative. And this is one of the definitions that are on the market, or is in the market. And that it's collaboration. A lot of collaboration between different actors. Here, the university has a very important role to play. It could be one of the key players in a cluster initiative. And it normally looks like this organizational-wise. It is often that you see university as a key player. Key player protect these intermediary organizations and network organizations. Because you're setting up a cluster initiative because you want to come close to the entrepreneurs or the target group you are facing. And the university normally has problems with coming close to the firms and actors outside, because it's a big population of actors. You know. And cluster initiative could be one way of segmenting up this in very efficient ways that you reach the target on a specific activity. So these are one of the examples that you can organize activities for your stakeholders, for instance. And of course, behind, there are a lot of success factors there too. Especially that you have a fire soul or a very engaged person or people doing this. Because if you don't have these people, the entrepreneurs inside the university doing these things externally, you will fail. So you have to have some kind of person or a group of people doing that. And of course other things. You need activities, you need to organize things, you need to have a critical mass, and etc. And of course an idea behind. The third model I want to take up is what we call the interactive research approach. It's a very simple way of doing research, and this is much more for maybe academics that are running research projects that also want to keep touch with the practical work. So this is an efficient way of working together with companies and stakeholders in your research project, independent in your discipline. It's not just something you do in the business school, this can be done in many other disciplines in the academic side. And for instance, the advantage of this. These are some points I just put down from my personally thinking. Maybe you can also fill a long list yourself as an academic, but it helps you to formulate relevant research questions. As your rector said, you have to make, what you do at the university, you have to make sense for the external world. This is a good way of formulating joint research questions in a research project. It also, what I call, reduce the context and construct biases. Because when you're developing a questionnaire or a research question, you have to be very careful what you're studying. And this is a way of reducing that bias. You can't use a large business model when you're studying a small firm. You have to understand what's going on into the context. And many other things. Of course, you increase your network. You get a critical friend from the external world. That you get critical questions from a firm into your research. And you can also contribute back to the firm you're working with. So examples of the advantage of that model. Finally, the pentahelix model. And that is, Stefan talked about the triple helix. This is a very smooth development of that model. And that shows that we can work with other organizations that are there also. And here you see civil society organizations that makes very great work when it comes to reducing poverty, finding new ways of meeting people that normally wouldn't meet the university world, for instance, etc. You have also the labor market organizations, both on the employers and the employment part. And that is also a very interesting part of the model. So what we do with that model is to basically broaden the scope of actors that are essential when investigating stakeholder environment of the university. We're putting also the social entrepreneurship part into the model. And finally, highlights new possible combinations of research teams. Because we are a forerunner of interdisciplinary approach. And that also should be the case when you're working with external partners. You can't just work with one type of firms. Maybe sometimes you have to do that, but to be a fruitful researcher and do nice research questions, you have to have also this cross-disciplinary approach when you're approaching your external work. Some conclusions. We have seen an extensive growth of this phenomenon. I think this is just the beginning, because universities are not isolated organization in society. It is a normal part of society, very important actor when it comes to take ideas out in the real world and produce value for the society. It has broadened a lot, of course, as I said, from just starting maybe IPR issues and spin-off companies to involve leadership and incentives and whatever it is, mobility of people. And of course, this has become a competitive factor for university, because if you can show that you are entrepreneurial, the image, you also will attract a lot of students and stakeholders to the university. And you can see that it's a competition between our universities, and this makes sense for the leadership to take care of them. And finally, last picture. This is what I call a model university, where you create synergies between research, teaching, and what you do externally. And so these three missions of the university don't work isolated to each other. That means that you have students coming in to firms doing works there, everything from business planning, doing a whole page, whatever it is. that also that you can do things from the firms to the university. You can employ professional practices. You can take guest lecturers in from the firms into the university as living cases.